The table was set like a magazine spread, fine china, gold-rimmed glasses, a tiered cake tall enough to need engineering. My sister stood beside it like a cover model, hair glossy, her smile curated. It was my father's 60th birthday. Laughter filled the air, but it didn't reach me. I sat 2 chairs down from my mother, who hadn't acknowledged my arrival. My sister, Renee, had been fawned over since the moment she walked in with an envelope and a performative kiss on Dad's cheek. She sent us $5,000 again this month, my mother had bragged loudly as I entered, without us even asking. I waited for the right moment. When everyone was seated and glasses were raised for another round of flattery, I stood and walked over to Dad. I handed him a small, white envelope. Inside was a card and $200 in cash.
Clean.
Folded.
Simple.
His fingers paused as he opened it. He pulled out the money, stared for a moment, and then laughed. A gift of just $200? He scoffed, loud enough for the whole table to hear. That's sweet, Ava. Maybe now you'll feel like you contributed something real.
Snickers.
Renee looked down, hiding a smirk. But it was my mother's words that did it. At least Renee is useful. She's not pretending to help. I froze. The humiliation didn't rise in a scream or in tears. It sank quietly, like a rock thrown into a lake, sinking deep, steady, final. I glanced at Renee. She didn't say a word.
Didn't defend me.
Didn't blink. I could have lashed out, exposed everything right there. But I didn't. I just smiled. That $5,000? I said, soft but clear. That wasn't from Renee. That money came from my anonymous account. The laughter stopped. My father's expression flickered.
Confused.
Then offended. What are you talking about? I straightened my posture and looked him directly in the eye. The account you've been receiving monthly payments from. For the last 11 months. The one you've assumed was Renee's generosity. That account was mine. Mom's fork dropped. My sister's face drained of color. For the first time in years, the table was quiet when I spoke. While you were praising her, mocking me, I was the one paying for your rental, covering your prescriptions, handling your insurance, funding your Netflix, and sending groceries when you couldn't remember to shop. I stepped away from the table, still calm, still smiling. I didn't want credit. I just wanted to help. My father stood up abruptly. That's not funny. I nodded. You're right. It's not. And with that, I walked out. Didn't slam the door. Didn't raise my voice. Just picked up my bag and left the party. My phone buzzed seconds later with texts. None from them. All from friends at the table who didn't know what to say. I didn't reply. That night, I sat at my kitchen table in silence. I opened my laptop and logged in to every account tied to my parents' lives. One by one, I shut them all down. Auto payments, subscriptions, grocery deliveries, cell phone plans, credit cards, their condo lease. I drafted a letter, printed it on red paper, folded it cleanly, slid it into an envelope. On the front I wrote, immediate contract termination. My name is Ava Thompson, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Because when they laughed at what they thought was a small gift, they never imagined it was the last one they'd ever receive. I never wanted recognition. That was the truth. Maybe that's why I let them assume for so long, why I kept the donations anonymous, why I never corrected my mother when she said, "Thank God for Renee." Even when the credit was stolen, I stayed quiet, because I believed family wasn't about spotlight. It was about sacrifice. But sacrifice, I've learned, without respect, is just exploitation wrapped in guilt. It started small. My parents had fallen behind on rent. Renee had offered to help but never followed through. I called the landlord directly. Paid 3 months in advance. Quietly. No names. Then came the cell phone bills. The overdue medical copays. My father's dental procedure. A broken washing machine. Groceries. Utility bills. Insurance lapses. Each time, I stepped in. Quietly. Strategically. I created a new checking account, labeled it Family Uplift, masked my name from outgoing statements. Paid directly. Every payment note simply read, "Support from a grateful source." They never asked who.
They just assumed it was Renee. And Renee?
She didn't deny it. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. The bills were paid. That was enough. But over time, the illusion twisted. Renee began bragging. She'd sit at brunch with them and say things like, "I'm happy to carry the family a little. Not everyone can give like I do, Mom." And my mother, lips pursed with pride, would reply, "You were always the responsible one." They praised her in front of friends, showered her with thank yous. And all the while, Renee never sent $1. She just let me do the heavy lifting and took the spotlight for it. It wasn't just financial. It was emotional. They made it clear. Renee was the favorite, the golden daughter. I was the disappointment with a small job, a tiny apartment, and nothing to offer but cheap sentiments. They didn't see the extra shifts I worked, the nights I sat calculating how to split my income 3 ways, between my life, my future, and their comfort. And I never asked for praise. But I also never asked to be humiliated. That night, at the party, when my father laughed at my gift, when my mother spat, "You're just pretending to help," something broke. Not in anger, but in clarity. They hadn't just ignored my help. They had used it, abused it, built Renee's halo out of my hands. So I took those hands back.
I didn't sleep that night.
Instead, I opened every account they were connected to, everything I had built to support them. Click by click, I dismantled their false kingdom, closed credit cards, revoked leasing payments, removed utilities, canceled prescriptions and delivery schedules, blocked every system that allowed them to live in comfort off my invisible support. Then I drafted the letter. It was short, professional, but ice cold. To whom it may concern, your benefits under the anonymous support agreement have been terminated effective immediately. Please seek assistance from the individual you publicly credit. I signed it only with my initials.
AT.
Then I placed it inside a red envelope. Heavy. Final. And the next morning, I made sure it was the first thing they saw when they came knocking. Because I wasn't pretending to help. I was the help.
And now?
Help had left the building. That night, I didn't cry. Not one tear. I didn't rage, scream, or punch a pillow. That's not how I handle betrayal. I sat at my kitchen table with soft jazz playing low, wrapped in a blanket of realization. I wasn't angry that they took me for granted. I was angry that I let them. For years. Their comfort had come at the cost of my exhaustion. I was the one skipping vacations, passing on dinner outings with friends, saying, "I'm saving up for something," when that something was them. I had postponed my dreams to pay for their delusions.
Now,
I was done financing my own invisibility. I poured a cup of tea, opened my laptop again, and double-checked each cancellation. Heavy checkmark credit cards closed. Heavy checkmark online grocery delivery terminated. Heavy checkmark streaming services logged out and locked. Heavy checkmark rent revoked. Landlord notified. Heavy checkmark phone lines shut down, numbers released. Each click felt like a stitch in a wound finally closing. They would wake up tomorrow thinking the world was normal. But by sunset, they'd be face to face with the consequences they always believed would never touch them. I logged into my secure banking app, reviewed the monthly reports. Over $48,000. That's what I had spent on them in under 2 years. Every dime disguised. Every transaction cloaked in anonymity. Every ounce of pride swallowed. Not once did I ask them to recognize me. But once they mocked me for pretending to help. That's when I realized I'd built them an empire they didn't even thank me for. They didn't just believe I was irrelevant. They believed I owed them. They laughed at my $200 birthday gift, without once realizing it was a farewell. I printed the transaction log, slipped it into the red envelope with the termination letter, wrote 3 words on the front in gold ink. Immediate contract termination. I sealed it, weighed it in my hand. It felt like closure. At dawn, I drove to their building, the same place I'd paid the rent on for the past 11 months. Their mailbox had my name on the lease. Their doorman knew my face. I left the red envelope on the floor just outside their door, exactly where I had left groceries, care packages, medicine. But this time I didn't knock.
I just walked away.
No noise. No goodbye. No hint of guilt. Back home, I opened the curtains. Let the sun fill the room. Breathed deeply. My phone buzzed. It was starting. First, "Hey, the Wi-Fi isn't working. Did you forget to pay?" Then, "Ava, the rent hasn't gone through. Something's wrong with the card." And then my mother, "Netflix logged us out. Is the password changed? What's happening?" I didn't answer. I brewed coffee. Watched as my silence became their reckoning. Because I didn't need to raise my voice. All I had to do was stop enabling them. And that was louder than anything I could have ever said. The first call came at 7:14 a.m. I let it ring. The second came 3 minutes later. Then another. And another. By 7:45 a.m., I had 12 missed calls, 6 voicemails, and 4 texts. None from my sister. All from my parents. Each one a shade deeper into panic. "Ava, the lights just cut off. We thought it was the storm, but can you check? Our phones aren't working. Mine says no service. Did you switch carriers? The building manager just said our rent's overdue. We're in the middle of a lease.
Please call."
Your father's furious. But the one that made me smile? There's a red envelope on the floor. "Did you leave this? What does this mean, Ava?" They opened it. I know the moment they did. Because the calls stopped. All at once. Silence finally landed like a gavel in a courtroom. Inside the envelope was a letter.
Typed. Clean.
Ruthless. Immediate contract termination. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, as of today, all financial assistance previously extended to you by the anonymous party referenced in your rental, utilities, credit, and subscription accounts is officially terminated. All accounts were created and funded under the name of Ava Thompson, without public recognition, compensation, or acknowledgement. As you have now made it abundantly clear that such support was not only unappreciated but openly mocked, this letter serves as notification that you are no longer entitled to any further assistance. Kindly seek help from the daughter you praised so highly, the one you thought was helping you. Enclosed, a full printout of all transactions covering the past 22 months. Total, $48,317.91. Breakdown. Rent, 11 months, $16,500. Utilities, $4,700. Groceries, $6,900. Credit card payments, $9,200. Subscriptions, phones, extras, $4,900. Emergency expenses, $6,117.91. Effective immediately. Sincerely, the one you thought was useless.
A.T.
I imagine the silence in their living room as they read that. The shrinking in my mother's spine. The blood draining from my father's smug face. The walls that once echoed with their pride, suddenly suffocating them in shame. They hadn't lost money. They'd lost control. And worse, they'd lost the illusion that they were ever the ones holding the family together. I turned off my phone and poured a cup of coffee. For once, it tasted exactly like I liked it. No bitterness. No guilt. Just quiet satisfaction. By noon, the calls resumed. But now they were different.
"Ava, please call me."
I didn't mean what I said. It was a joke, sweetie. You misunderstood. You're sensitive. You can't just walk away. We're your parents. We're your obligation. And that was the moment I realized they'd never understand. Because to them, I was never a daughter. I was a resource. One they used. One they praised only when it benefited them.
And now?
The resource had unplugged. The ATM had logged out. The daughter had disappeared. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. By evening, the storm inside their home was louder than any thunder outside. Not a single card worked. The utilities stayed off. Groceries didn't arrive. The landlord issued a warning notice taped to their door, rent overdue by 2 weeks. Dad tried to shout him down, but the look on the man's face said it all. Not this time. And then the real unraveling began. With Renee. She arrived mid-meltdown, perfectly polished but already sweating, her heels clicking too fast across the tile. "What do you mean she paid for all this?" she barked. "She's lying. You know she always wants attention." My father threw the envelope onto the table. $48,000, he snapped. "That's what your sister has given us." My mother sat stunned, the transaction list trembling in her hands. Renee blinked. Her smile cracked. I never said I paid all of it, but you let us believe it," Mom said slowly. "You let us praise you. You accepted the credit." Renee stammered. "Well, yeah, but Ava never said anything. If she cared so much, why was she hiding behind an anonymous name?" Dad pointed at the bolded line. "Funded entirely by Ava Thompson." He turned to my mother. "We laughed at her, mocked her, and she was the one keeping us alive." The reality began to settle. It wasn't just that I stopped helping. It was that the myth of their golden daughter was crumbling before their eyes. Renee, panicking, pulled out her phone. "I'll fix it. I'll send something now. I'll transfer." "From where?" Dad growled. She froze. They stared at her. Her secret came spilling out like water from a cracked vase. Maxed out credit cards. Behind on her car payment. No savings. No investments. No backup plan. Just curated selfies and borrowed status. "She never sent us anything," my mother whispered. Not once. The silence that followed was suffocating. No more laughter. No more smugness. Just three people in a house they could no longer afford, staring at the ghost of the daughter they buried under praise for someone else. Meanwhile, I sat on my small balcony, watching the city light up like gold beneath dusk. I didn't need to be there to see the collapse. I had seen it coming for years. They had been building their identity on lies and ego for so long that the truth wasn't just painful, it was destructive. Renee called me 5 times that night. Left voicemails full of confusion, bitterness, faux innocence. "Ava, come on. You're not really going to just disappear, are you?"
So, what if they thought it was me?
"You should have spoken up if it mattered that much. You're being dramatic. Just turn it back on. Please." I blocked her. Because people who use silence as a weapon don't get to complain when you use it for peace. And my parents? They stopped calling for a few days. Too humiliated to beg. Too proud to admit the truth. They'd praised the wrong daughter, mocked the right one, and built a castle on a foundation I had quietly held in place until I walked away. For the first time in years, I did nothing. No autopay. No delivery schedules. No secret deposits. Just silence. And in that silence, they began to unravel and then, slowly, rebuild. Not gracefully. Not without resistance. But out of necessity. They were evicted from the upscale condo I had been quietly paying for. The rent hadn't been truly covered in months by anyone but me, and with no backup plan, they were forced to move in with Renee. That lasted exactly 2 weeks. Renee's apartment was a stage, not a home. No savings. No budget. Just fake luxury and rising debt. Mom couldn't stand the clutter. Dad couldn't stand the truth. Eventually, they rented a small, dimly lit one-bedroom apartment in the outer suburbs. No concierge. No spa tub. Just 4 walls and forced humility. I watched it unfold from a distance, not with bitterness, but with clarity. Every piece of their old life was gone. The brunches where they praised Renee. The phone calls where they forgot I existed. The holidays where my $50 gift cards were tossed aside while Renee's empty promises were toasted.
Gone.
And in their place, reality. Renee moved out of state, claiming she needed space, but everyone knew she was running from shame she wasn't strong enough to face. My mother tried texting me once. "I miss you." I didn't reply. My father called from a new number 3 days later. Left a message. His voice was different. No anger. No sarcasm.
Just.
"We were wrong. I was wrong." Still, I didn't reply. Because rebuilding isn't just about bricks and rent. It's about learning what respect actually costs. And for the first time, they were paying for it with something more valuable than money. Humility. They started working again. My mother took a job at a local flower shop, small shifts, quiet hours. My father, who once bragged about never having to stoop, began stocking shelves at a neighborhood market. It wasn't vengeance. It was balance. And balance, I'd learned, can feel like justice. I started focusing on my own life again. With no more monthly donations bleeding me dry, I invested in myself. Took a weekend trip for the first time in years. Signed up for courses I'd put off for too long. Relaunched my online consulting service, this time without guilt, without distraction. Clients rolled in. Within 3 months, I doubled my income and moved into a sunny apartment downtown. Nothing extravagant. Just mine. Earned.
Owned.
Untouched by shame. One morning, I passed my parents' new building on the way to a meeting.
I didn't go in.
I just stood across the street, sipping coffee, watching through the glass as my mother arranged yellow daisies in a vase behind the counter. She looked tired, but not angry, just present. And maybe, for the first time in years, truly aware of what it means to live without illusions. As I turned to leave, I remembered something Grandpa used to say. People think kindness is a faucet you control. But one day, the well runs dry, and when it does, you better hope you were drinking with gratitude. Mine had run dry, and now they were learning to walk miles for what used to be handed to them with love. Freedom didn't look like fireworks. It looked like slow mornings and silence I didn't have to fill. It looked like grocery bags I bought for myself without calculating whether Mom's next delivery would overdraw my account. It looked like eating dinner without being too exhausted to chew. For the first time in years, I had my life back, and I used every inch of it. I turned my small side hustle into a business. My consulting service, once squeezed between cleaning up after others, was now thriving. Word spread fast. Clients raved. I gained contracts, referrals, and within 6 months, I hired 2 part-time assistants. People saw me as competent, sharp, dependable. All the things I had always been behind the curtain.
And now?
The curtain was gone. I gave a keynote at a women's finance conference in the city. The theme: How to Build While They Doubt You. I spoke honestly. About invisible labor. About family dynamics that consume you. About how generosity without boundaries becomes self-destruction. Afterward, a young woman approached me with tears in her eyes. My parents always made me feel like I owed them for being born, she whispered. Your story gave me permission to stop. I hugged her. No words needed, because I knew that feeling too well. And now, I was finally standing outside it. Back home, my new apartment was filled with things that reflected me. Warm lights. Soft colors. Quiet joy. No red envelopes. No ringing phones. No silent resentment hanging in the walls. Just peace. My son, now in college, called one night after hearing about the speech. Mom, he said, they finally know what I've always known. What's that? I asked. That you don't just survive, he said. You rebuild. And then you build something no one can take away. I smiled, thinking of that night at the birthday table, when they mocked my $200 gift. They never realized it wasn't a small offering. It was my final investment in people who saw my love as currency and not commitment. I had poured into them like a fountain until I learned how to pour into myself. And now, the returns were finally mine. A week later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. I knew the handwriting. My father. Inside one line. We're sorry. For everything. If you ever choose to visit, we'd be honored to see you. Not as a provider, but as our daughter. I didn't cry. I didn't rush to call. But I sat with it. And for the first time, I realized I no longer hated them. They weren't villains. Just weak people who mistook control for love. And I wasn't a victim. I was a woman who finally made her own name mean more than her family's approval. I folded the letter and tucked it into a drawer, not to cherish, but to remember. That even apology, when too late, becomes a footnote. Because my story wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about value. The moment I realized I was never useless is the moment I stopped proving it. The air was cold that morning. I stood outside their apartment building. Not the luxury condo I once paid for, but the modest complex tucked between a laundromat and a 24-hour pharmacy. I hadn't planned to stop. I was on my way to meet a new client. Life was good.
Free. Full.
But something pulled me to that sidewalk. Across the street, I saw them. My father, grayer, slower, carrying 2 plastic bags. My mother behind him, squinting in the light, wrapped in a shawl that looked older than I remembered her allowing. They looked real.
Human. Small.
They didn't see me, and I didn't make myself seen. I just stood in the shadow of a telephone pole, watching 2 people who once defined every part of me move like they no longer controlled anything but their own next step. And for the first time, I didn't feel pain. Or even pride. I felt peace. Because the reckoning had already come. Not in shouting. Not in courtroom drama. Not in revenge porn or social media justice. But in the quietest form of all, consequences. They had built a pedestal for the wrong daughter. They had mocked the one who sacrificed silently. They had measured love by dollar signs and performance, and forgotten who had been carrying their survival the whole time. And now they lived within their means. Now they worked jobs they once looked down on. Now they learned humility the way I learned endurance. I never needed revenge. I needed recognition. But when that didn't come, I built something better. A life that didn't require it. A week later, I received a package at my office. No card. No message. Just one item inside. My red envelope. Folded neatly. Untouched. But inside it a note I hadn't written. For words. My father's handwriting. We finally understand now. I held the letter for a long time, then slipped it into a drawer right next to the one from my mother, and closed it. Because this story wasn't about reconciliation. It wasn't about winning. It was about remembering who I am without needing anyone else to confirm it. That night, I stood on my balcony with a glass of wine, the skyline glowing in front of me. And I whispered to no one in particular. I gave them everything. And when they called me useless, I left with one thing they'd never expected. My worth. They thought they were shaming me, but I was never ashamed. I was saving. Not just money, but strength, pride, and the will to walk away. And when I finally stopped giving, they finally started seeing. Not who they thought I was, but who I had been all along.